Hello. Ooh, hey. So my name is Romain. I'm with everVision. Eva already explained what everVision does, so I don't really have to do that. I'm branding with everVision.
Hey guys, so my name is Sebastian. I'm one of the developers for Decent.land, and I just joined the team actually 2.5 months ago, so it's been pretty exciting times building social infrastructure, and I'm glad to be here with y'all.
Hey everyone, I'm Sam. I originally initiated the process of creating Arweave, I guess.
That's a fun one to follow.
That was a good one.
I'm David, founder of a multi-party decision-making protocol, aka contest, called Joke, where we'll be building an Arweave. I also help advise Bundler.
Hey, can you hear me? Hey, I'm Justin Shaw. I'm the founder of Permafacts. We're building a protocol for detecting facts, essentially.
Where are they?
Where are what?
Yeah, where do we find these facts?
On the permaweb.
Oh, okay.
So, Sam, first question is for you. So Forward Research's mission is to build the tools that make cyberspace freer and fairer for everyone using Arweave. So we've got Pages, Now, Stamps, Facts, and Alex are some of the projects that you've helped bring to life. What does your team look for in the people that build these tools for broader adoption of Arweave?
Actually, Tate said this right. It's passion. I think that you can teach people skills, and realistically, if someone is going to found a protocol or a company potentially, even building on top of something in the ecosystem, they're going to have to learn like a ton of stuff. There is no person with any background that is going to be, or maybe there's a dozen or 2 dozen people in the world that have all of the skills that they would need in order to do that successfully. So what you've got to be better at is learning. Yeah, you've got to be good at being bad is one of the strange things that I learned along the way. You've got to be comfortable that you don't understand everything and then just learn as fast as you possibly can. That in itself is actually a very, very powerful skill. So we look for that kind of thing. And then passion. Ultimately, these protocols and these projects are started by people that are going to work 24/7 without a single other person mentioning it to them. And in fact, actually, the people that they speak to in their life are going to tell them, that's a kind of boring idea. Or I sometimes tell the story. My father and I were climbing a mountain when I first came up with the idea for Arweave, and his first feedback was, "Yeah, you've had better ideas." So, in order to build one of these things, you have to have a lot of passion and belief that that is the thing that you must invest all of your time in doing. That is something that we can't teach. So everything else. Yeah, if you got the passion, that's great. Ability to learn is also super useful, but everything else we can kind of teach. And a lot of the projects that we've seen here today came through the Open Web Foundry program, and I know that there are people from Forward Research that we're incubating now here, and we've sort of seen that process over and over again, where the founders, they sort of learn as they go, and they become, extremely powerful and good at it eventually.
Sebastian, what is Decent.land doing now and looking to do in the future as they spear cross-chain identity with Arweave and the ARC protocol? Ooh.
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. I'm glad you asked it. So right now, as we know, the whole fate of an ecosystem, its success and whatnot, is based on commitment and innovation, right? How willing are builders willing to come in, build, innovate, and add quality to the ecosystem, right? So, right now, Decent.land, for anyone that doesn't know who Decent.land is, it's a protocol that focuses on social reputation identity protocols that are aimed at powering Web3 communities, okay? What does that mean? So I'll just kind of give you guys more quick lineup to answer the first part of the question and then go on to what we're about to do in the future, right? So our lineup consists of ARC protocol, which is cross-chain identity attestation. So basically, if you've got an Avalanche wallet, a Near wallet, an Arweave wallet, let's connect them all together so we know who the owner is, right? Not doxing them, but connecting it so that way we can add utility and some interesting things to the concept, which I'll discuss in a bit. The second part is ANS, Arweave name service, right? And so I know a lot of people in the community are familiar with it, have their ideas about it, but just to kind of give you a quick gist on it, we just launched it 13 days ago, and it's meant to power permaweb identity. Right, so name services, as we know on Ethereum and on these other popular chains and what they do, we have it resolved back to your Arweave address, right? Some cool things that we're going to talk about shortly on that point. We also have Center Protocol, which is on-chain messaging and notifications. And then finally, we have Molecule.sh, which is a developer toolkit aimed at grabbing any sort of Arweave-based transaction or Arweave-based smart contracts and making it multi-chain. And the reason why I say multi-chain and Arweave is because we know Arweave is the best when it comes to permanent data storage. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, right? It's the best. So to give it more utility and give it more power, we should make it connect to other chains that have other values and utilities at play. Because if we can do that, we can all work together and we can really reflect and highlight the strengths of Arweave. We got something magical going on. And I don't think anybody's going to disagree with me on that point, right? Now to answer your second part of your question, the future. We got actually a couple interesting things going on in the future, right? So we know that Arweave, data provenance, right? Big. And we know that it has its own standard. Like I said in my last point, we need to figure out how we can reach out and connect and do things on a multi-chain level, which is what we're doing with Arc, and we kind of see Arc protocol acting as the glue to grab any kind of Arweave-based transaction or event and make it accessible to any address on multiple chains, including Ethereum, Avalanche, Near, you name it, to the outside world, right? And I mean, we got a couple things going on. I mean, hang on, 30 seconds.
You want me to hold the mic?
No, I got it, man, I got it. My team didn't let me leave the hotel without this piece of paper. So, I mean, right now we're focusing on a couple things, guys. Identity, right? So one of the things that I'll just throw out there quickly is the ARC score. So a lot of times you get a lot of wallets getting into a community, people getting into a community, and we don't know who they are, right? So we kind of envision a system where we can implement the credit score of blockchain identity. Why do we need credit scores? You got to buy a house with it, you got to buy a car with it, whatever it may be, right? So we want to implement something called the ARC score, where it looks at a variety of things. It looks at your stamps, your POAPs, your gas spent, your NFTs owned, time that the wallet has been in existence, and it assesses how credible you are as a person, right? Now that's not some of the things I'm going to give out right now, but there's some of the things that we're working on and building for the future. But most importantly, it's just to connect people through identity, because if we can connect people through identity, we can grow this economy that we have on the blockchain and really help spearhead Arweave.
In an increasingly polarized world, where up, sometimes down, truth is something that everybody looks for in order to stay grounded. Permafacts is leading the charge in developing truth markets for data stored on Arweave. So how does a permanent record keep everybody honest and inspire trust amongst the community?
Yeah, well, I think that this is an interesting concept, and I like to tell this sort of as a story. When I used to try to pitch I had a Bitcoin moment a long time ago, sort of the moment when I realized how powerful Bitcoin was. And then I tried to convey that message to my dad. I was like, hey, Dad, so there's this new cryptocurrency, and like, you can just buy this crypto and nobody can take it from you. It'll be there forever, and you can access it anywhere on the planet. And he looks at me and he goes, oh, nice. I was like, what do you mean, oh, nice? Like, that's huge. So then I go back and I'm thinking to myself for a little bit, and I do this often. I just sort of think through how can I convey this message to someone better? And then I start coming up with different ways of doing it. So I go back to my dad and I'm like, hey, Dad, so imagine somebody is in a country called like Lemon or something like that. And the government in this country is starting to otherize people and do things that might make people feel unsafe. And then and potentially coming down the road, somebody might say, oh, well, there could be a genocide on the horizon. So what that person can now do is save up some money, put it on Bitcoin, and then leave the planet, or not leave the planet, leave the country and go to a different place on the planet so that they can be safe. But there was never a possibility of doing that before Bitcoin, easily. With Arweave, I see another thing happening. It's like, we now have the opportunity anywhere on the planet to upload anything at all times. So with Arweave, what's happening is we're creating a way, almost like a buffer, that could potentially eventually prevent a genocide from happening. And in a country where your government is turning on you and making you, and otherizing you or doing whatever, and you're seeing these signs coming, you now have an opportunity to upload images to Arweave anywhere on the planet that anyone can see, and then anyone can come and help you in the long run. And I think that this is an extremely powerful thing about Arweave. And then with Permafacts, what I'd like to do is I'd like to build a protocol that allows you to attach a fact mechanism or a fact market to any transaction on the permaweb. And then from there, what you have is you've essentially decentralized the truth. Now, people can put skin in the game, and they can either support or oppose an assertion or any transaction on the permaweb. And over time, what you're doing is you're decentralizing the truth, and you've built this protocol, and you can build layers on top of this protocol to build amazing feeds of relevant information that you can hopefully rely on being truth. And I think that that's the power of Arweave, and I think the power of Arweave is even more powerful than the power of Bitcoin.
That's awesome. Justin, let me ask you this question. Do you think that having a permanent record of truth, how do we make sure that it's objective? Is that possible?
Well, I think it's hard to say what objective truth is. Like anytime you see something on the internet, usually what happens is it's like has partial truths in it, but it's been sort of transformed in a way to make the person believe something else. So they might say the truth, but they convey the message in a way that the person thinks the complete opposite. And then that information on Twitter, for example, is easy to retweet. So if you agree with it, and there's no punishment for retweeting that type of information, there's only reward. So you just promote the ideas that you agree with. You get your dopamine rush for having those opinions and people agreeing with you and liking and retweeting those opinions. But there's no actual skin in the game. So if somebody takes a position on some assertion, right, and then maybe we have a really good example right now. Like 2 days ago, the FBI just announced that the Wuhan virus, or the coronavirus, they believe that it came from the Wuhan lab. It took them 3 years to find that out. Now imagine I had Permafacts that day. This is sort of a thought experiment that I've been doing. If I would have had Permafacts that day, when early on in the pandemic, and then they said that the virus came out of a wet market from a mammal that was in the wet market, when that wet market is within like 5 miles of a virology lab, I would have made an assertion right then and there, and I would have said, this is BS. It didn't come from a wet market. It probably came from the lab. And other people can oppose or support that assertion. And then yesterday, I probably would have made a lot of money, because it turned out the FBI supported my assertion, if that assertion were true in the past. And there's a lot of stories that I'd love to sort of play this or sort of project this idea onto, but that's a good example.
That's a very insightful example. Thank you, Justin. Great answer. Well, speaking of communication, David Phelps, the communicator, I got a question for you. So education is a massive part of fostering a community. What tools have you found to be the most impactful when mentioning Arweave to your audience? And is there a utility of Arweave that you've noticed attracts people to the ecosystem, like a main utility people are like, oh, that's great?
Yeah, it's hard, right? Because it's like ChatGPT. There's so many use cases that it can be hard to pick and choose. So I think part of the issue is like, how do you get people excited by permanent storage? And do you get people excited by permanent storage, right? Like, do people really care about permanent storage? People have only had the internet for 20 years. Most of the data is really recent. People haven't experienced loss of data to a great degree. This isn't necessarily something that's like resonating deeply with most people right now, right? So I think it's like, to tackle that, there's kind of a spectrum of choices. And on one side, you can kind of say, here's why permanent storage matters, and this is easy to understand, but maybe less resonant. And on the other hand, you can say, actually, let's go way deeper and give something that's way more abstract, but more exciting as well. And so I'll run through a few of those if that's helpful. I think, case one is what Justin just said. Like imagining a portal in the future where it's like you can click any part of the world, and then there's a timeline, and you choose any moment in that timeline, and you see all of the content that particular part of the world at that particular moment, right? You have like Bundler's proof of provenance, you know that it was generated there. Like imagine how that just changes journalism, right? Like it's a totally game changer, because anybody can now produce journalism based on like being able to go and directly see what was there, right? So that's a use case that just was never really possible before now, right, that we have. So I think thinking about censorship resistance, Tiananmen Square unfolds and like everyone is able to just upload video directly to Arweave, right? Censorship resistant, any journalist in the world can look at that. That's a game changer for revolutions, that's a game changer for politics, right? So I think that's one. I think, sticking to the like, why does permanent storage matter? Just within crypto, massive use cases. Like right now, block space is like, pretty expansive, and so you have protocols like Celestia and all of these L2s, and like they're not too worried about data storage. But meanwhile, it's not just a question that people don't want to upload their NFTs to Ethereum because like the data costs are so expensive for that. They'd rather just have metadata point to AWS, right? It's also just like to be able to store this like on an ongoing basis, it's going to get really expensive over time. And so being able to have something like Arweave be the place that is the data storage layer for the rest of crypto is really important. If you think about the modular thesis right now, people talk about these like 4 layers of, consensus, data availability, execution, and settlement. And it's like, well, there's a 5th layer, and that's data storage, right? And it's like, you don't care about that now because you have plenty of block space and it's cheap for you to store it, but you will long term as state expands and there's all those transactions. So I think like, that's more on the simple side. But then you start to think like, why does permanent storage really matter, long term? And it's like composability. Like, if you really want to make sure that any piece of content you put up is able to be drawn on by somebody else into the future and that they can remix it, reuse it, etc., that's composability, and that's never existed before, right? We haven't had composable data systems in the past, right, that have been open. So like thinking like if you're a DJ and you put out a beat, right, and you want someone else to go and remix it, that's composability, right? That you have put that beat out there, anyone else can go remix that 50 years from now. And maybe you can still get a cut of the royalty for having made that as well, right? So I think that's what, this is the final point I make, is like that's what gets to what's most exciting for me about Arweave, which is like not thinking about it as permanent storage solution, but thinking about it as a content blockchain. Like thinking like this is a place where anybody who has content will want to go. It's way cheaper, right? If you're dealing with a financial blockchain, you have to verify state constantly. So if like one person, their balance goes up, that means somewhere else in the state of that chain, someone else's balance has gone down. And so because of those kinds of dependencies, you have to verify state all the way across every single transaction that has been done, right? And so like that gets really expensive as you start to scale. And that's just totally prohibitive for stuff like content that doesn't need that. There's no dependency, right? If someone uploads a book, that doesn't affect how somebody else uploaded a video, right? And so thinking like the cheapness of this as these other financial blockchains start to scale, like they're going to need to have a non-financial blockchain, right, that can really handle this kind of content and data for stuff like NFTs, et cetera. And like, what is that content blockchain? Like, what is the protocol that anyone can build on top of so that you can put content out there in the world, people can remix it, et cetera. And so you think about like, social media protocols like Lens, for example. You think about just like, what does TikTok look like, in the future? What does it look like when anybody can upload a duet, they upload their half, someone else can remix it, and when that person monetizes, the first person gets a cut, right? Like, what does that look like? You need composability, you need permanent storage, right? But what you really need is a content blockchain. And the only chain that can do this is Arweave.
That's huge. Content blockchain. I love that. Yeah, you explained that super well. And it's interesting how people have different emotional reactions when you learn about Arweave, right? So you have to like figure out what's my audience and how do I win them over. But you're so good at talking to so many people and hitting all these different things, and you just gave us that synopsis. So thanks, man.
I don't know if that's true, but I appreciate that. Thank you.
This man, Romain, he connects communities. That's one of his superpowers. And you know him from everVision and being a very positive central force in the Arweave world. I was wondering, can you tell us, like, everVision has a strong presence in China. Like, what are some of the things you've been doing and helping with to help it grow outside of China?
Communicate, really. I mean, with everyone. For example, we've been communicating a lot with decent.land. I'm assuming you heard of ANS. We partnered with them. They are using Everpay in order to make super easy, feeless transactions, real time, everything, just to make it easier for their user. So I would say, I mean, the biggest thing, I guess I wish I could talk as much as you, because I mean, I don't know what else to say. Just communicate, really. Just try to meet as many people within the Arweave ecosystem. I mean, everyone's amazing here. So, yeah, I guess that's about it. I'm sorry.
So this is for all of you, and this could get very heated in a beautiful way. Community is one of the biggest Web3 buzzwords, and community is not one size fits all. There are builder communities, user communities, speculator communities, and more. What does the Arweave ecosystem need to do as a community to make the tent bigger and gain mass adoption, if that's even the plan? Who wants to tackle that one?
I mean, I think that the strategy that we decided and sort of embarked upon, I guess, 5 years ago now, was we're going to build an open, transparent protocol, and then we're going to speak to developers that might want to use it. Protocols don't have end users. Like, in the early days, we would talk to people, and they'd be like, "Oh, this is really interesting. How do I upload data?" And be like, "Well, what kind of data? How do you want to do it?" There's so many different versions of that. And so we realized, look, there are so many different verticals that you can apply permanent data storage to, and I totally agree for what it's worth with the content blockchain idea. I think that the composability of the data is something that 95% of people haven't realized exists yet, and we're about 2% done exploring, 1% done exploring. I think that will be huge eventually, absolutely huge. And but yes, so there are so many different verticals you can apply permanent data storage to. The only way that I can see that you can reach all of the different, say, target audiences is to reach a developer that is interested in reaching that target audience. And that's what we've been doing, and well, here we are today. You know, there's so many different projects we've heard from today. It's amazing to see how the core utility of the network has spread into all of these different verticals and niches fundamentally. And so from our perspective, we spent a lot of time at the beginning doing that. I guess at Forward Research now, we're actually very, very gung-ho about this content blockchain idea. We think that the best way to bring this to the market, because this is not like there's an existing market and we can just go and say, hey, it would be better if your data was stored permanently, and they're like, oh, yeah, we wanted to do that. Okay, now you can use a system. It's not like that. You're absolutely right in describing that this system fundamentally did not exist previously. It's very, very radically different. I think the way that we bring that to the mass market is we demonstrate a few of the key use cases. And so at Forward Research, you mentioned some of the projects that we're incubating with the founders that work with us. That's one of our core focuses. You'll see that everything that we're doing there at the moment is openly remixable, or rather, it's in this space of composable data. So to give an example, Alex. Alex is a system which allows you to sponsor pools that archive data. So if you are interested in, I think one of the top ones right now is UFOs. For whatever reason, everyone likes UFOs right now, or balloons, or whatever they are. UAPs, UFOs, balloons. And someone made a pool for storing data about those things so that we can kind of create a permanent record of history that looks at these events, whatever they are. Well, you can put tokens into that, and then out the other side, you get these atomic assets, which then other people can look at, and they can stamp, which is a protocol made by Tom, who's sitting here, for those on YouTube. Yeah, you can stamp that data, which shows, oh, I find this interesting. It's like a universal like protocol. You can stamp any of the data in the system. And if you stamp it, then that data now shows up on this thing called now.arweave, or it's actually just called now, but you can access it at now.arweave.dev. And that's a kind of Reddit-like system for the permaweb, and it just shows you what people are stamping. And so that data that got into the network through Alex is now useful in this sort of shared Reddit system. But maybe you don't believe that the UFOs, I know it's a report that says those balloons are actually definitely aliens, guys. Well, you're not sure about that. You want to understand what the crowd thinks. So you can slap a fax market on top by just pressing a button, and that same data is now in the Permafacts ecosystem. And so you've got this one source of truth and provenance of the data being uploaded in the first place, and all of a sudden that data is in every application in the ecosystem. Another thing that we're working on is licensing. How do you make it so that, okay, so you can embed a token inside this piece of data if you want. In fact, if you were one of the people that contributed or essentially subsidized the archiving of that piece of UFO data in the first place, then you would be a sponsor of, I totally agree with Nader when he said earlier, no, ownership is not the right model for describing what is happening in blockchains, because you can't, they're immutable ledgers, right? Like you can't change them after the fact. So in what sense do you own it? I would say that the NFT space is really closer to sponsoring something. Anyway, so if you were the person that sponsored the upload of that piece of information, then when other people stamp it, you're actually the person that receives stamp token rewards. Yeah, and on top of that, we can do licensing and the likes, and that means that when someone remixes that piece of data in the future, they can, you have a sort of legal enforcement mechanism that says, hey, you have to credit the owners of this token for providing the source data. I think that is, like I said, 1% explored. If we get it right, it'll radically, radically, radically change the structure of the web. The web won't look anymore like a graph of interconnected web pages. It'll be like a massive open data lake of openly remixable and licensable assets or data. And your apps will sit on top as this thin layer, accessing or really organizing the information that is in this data lake. I digress.
Sebastian.
Yeah, so I can actually build off of Sam's point, valuable point, by the way. And basically what it all comes down to is building on your ecosystem. I think you can agree with me on that. Building capability, utility, having a lot of things to offer, right? Now, I like to, you just think about it for a second. What is the main reason that a lot of people choose to move to a new city? Why do you pick to move to a new city? Because there's things to do. There's places to live. There's work to find. There's basically a lot of stuff to do, right? So where am I getting at with this point? To answer the second part of your question, how do we achieve mass adoption on the chain? We have to think of it like this. If you are coming to a chain, why would you come to a chain? Because there's a lot of things to do. I can stake, I can store memory, I can do all sorts of things, right? So this is where I'm going to add in my pitch. It is super important for us to achieve this mass adoption model, let's say for Arweave and for what we see in the future, is if builders can get together and keep on building. Sam already said it. Let's open it up, let's make it transparent, let's make it easy for builders to come and build. But at the same time, builders need to come, team up, and create new things, new innovations. I'll give you some examples. So like Romain was just saying, with Everpay and decent.land working together, I owe it to these guys. Their system, their technology is so useful, so easy to use. There's no bugs. I'm actually impressed and kind of jealous because my code has bugs sometimes, but very good people, right? They've even shared some ideas with me. They're like, you guys should have an auction for your names. Bam, that's an example of synergy happening between builders, right? I want to give a shout out to Tate because he's one of the guys that has funded EXM, and I work with the main builder, Andres, on a daily basis. We talk daily, and he even floated the idea with me, builder to builder. Make and explore. So these are just little small examples where builders can come together in the ecosystem, share ideas, build it quickly, and introduce that added utility that like a city that has many things to do, we can become a blockchain that has many things to offer, many things to give to participants entering that are looking for value, looking for civil resistant, just all sorts of things that you could possibly imagine that the blockchain offers. It's there for you to offer. And I would say that as long as the community can come together, share ideas, build together, and work together, we should be able to achieve mass adoption via that way.
I'm going to add one little thing to that. I totally agree with that. And there's just one thing, fun, right? I think what we need is fun. For example, ANS, right? I own a lot of names, by the way, like a lot, right? But I actually, personally, as a user, as someone who's not a dev, I had fun doing that, right? I store on AR Drive, for example. Is that fun? Well, I mean, I don't know. It's certainly useful to store my pictures and everything forever, but it's not fun. So just to add to that, I think, maybe apps or whatnot that are, I guess, more interactive, more fun. That's my little.
And that dovetails with the point of passion, right? If something's fun, you're emotionally invested in it. When you're doing a presentation with any sort of like instructional design, you have to catch people's attention and have them be emotionally involved, right? So fun, I agree, it can be fun. Justin, I'm curious what you have to say about mass adoption, because like you're proposing this interesting solution, which really is a solution to a lot of the 21st century questions of like, what is truth, what is reality? Do you think the masses are ready for that? Do they deserve these tools? Yes,
Nobody
I guess.
deserves anything, honestly. That's what I think. At the end of the day, well, I shouldn't say that. People deserve things, but so as far as mass adoption, this is going to be a different angle. But I'll sort of start off where Sam left off, and Sam kind of said like protocol. There's sort of protocol things, and then the application layer where the application teams need to sort of build out their own communities. And what I've noticed really well. This is probably going to get a little pushback, but the NFT communities do this really well. And they're doing some interesting things. So when I look at the principles of persuasion, one of the first principles you see is called scarcity. Okay, so the NFT guys, they're building scarce things and they're selling them. Okay, that's cool. That's one of them. Another one would be the principle of, or how about this one? Another one would be reciprocation. So the idea would be, hey, I'm going to create a pre-mint list, and I'm going to bring people sort of into my community before this even kicks off and hook them up with a few NFTs, and now they're incentivized to promote your NFT project. And then they turn their, okay, so then that takes me to my third persuasion principle, which is the principle of social proof. So now all of a sudden you're sitting on Twitter, and everyone around you in your little group, in your little bubble on Twitter, is changing their profile pictures to the same profile pictures. Well, that's the principle of social proof, and we've seen this play out in many ways. It played out with masks on Twitter. It plays out all the time on Twitter. So I think that the NFT community takes it a bit too far at times. I think that the technical analysis community takes it a bit far too times, and it turns into a greed game. But I think that if these tools are used responsibly to build a community and make it fun, there's a lot of progress that can be made there as far as strategically persuading a community to onboard.
That's good. I thought it was interesting that both you, Justin and Sam, your origin stories with Arweave and blockchain involved your fathers. And that's maybe what we're just trying to prove to the people who came before us that.
Well, it's funny because when I said I kind of had an idea and it blew up on Twitter a tiny bit, and then I have Sam Williams likes my idea. And at the time, I didn't know exactly what was going on. I'm like, okay, Sam Williams really likes my idea. So I go to my wife and I say, Paige, Sam Williams really likes my idea. And she's like, well, what's your idea? And I tell her my idea, and she was like, what? How are you going to make money? I was like, well, never mind.
You're proof of Sam, though.
Yeah, it's proof of Sam.
Yeah.
That's tight. David, did you have anything to say about this? I'm curious.
Yeah, I think there's like this big question all across crypto right now, which is like, do you go after the current market or do you go after the market that doesn't exist, right? And it's like, of course, everyone wants to go after the current market. Everyone wants to think like, who's out there who could be storing stuff on Arweave instead of on AWS? And it's like, sure, yeah, there's a market there and there's cases to be made. But this gets really exciting when it's for all the things that have never been able to been built before, that don't exist. And it's a lot harder to imagine those, but you have to remember the TAM for that is 100x what the current TAM is, right? And so it's thinking like, how do we create new use cases for stuff that never could have happened before? Like how to, and my answer would be social. Like I really think it's gonna be social. Like, for anything in Web3 to be able to compete with Web 2, you're competing with the best social incentives ever created. And so you have to be able to build something that's as good socially, plus have the financial transactions and opportunity that you can get from crypto, right? And so thinking like, being able to create composable social networks is just so powerful, first of all, because it's never existed. Second of all, because it actually builds, revenue for creators, right, in a way. But it's also really powerful because it's the best network effects there are. Once people start remixing each other's content, then then they're also sharing that with others to then remix it as well. And you get this exponential growth that I think we're going to see over the next 5 years, where even 2 years from now, it might be barely noticeable, but 5 years from now, it will not.
It's like the Richard Dawkins origin of the meme, right? And talking about evolution, that was in Sam's keynote, that we can scale even more. It's a really interesting balance. It's like a tightrope walk, and it's always interesting. That's why it's cool to have this conversation. Well, speaking of conversations, does anyone here have any questions regarding community or the future for our panelists?
This question comes from Jacob on YouTube. It goes back to Sam's keynote too a little bit. Does the momentum of it still being early days of Arweave, encouraging the forks and stuff, does that encourage teams to then divide amongst the forks so you're only building on one fork versus another?
Simple answer, no. I mean, for a start, like the evolutionary system, as I tried to lay out in the talk, I don't think we will need this for the foreseeable future. Like we built Arweave as it exists, the 2.x protocol series, to last. But we need to have a solution to problems that we don't know, that we can never predict today, that will emerge hundreds of years from now. The product we are building together as an ecosystem is permanent data storage. We have to have solutions to the long-term problems. And so that's why we're putting that in place today. There's also a part of the system, if you look at the docs, that creates an incentive to actually combine forks as well. So as well as the evolutionary process that sort of, you could say it's divergent, there's also a convergent incentive, which frankly, in the talk is just too much to go into in one go. But if you read all the docs, there's a lot of technical detail about that. There's actually the math we've pretty carefully modeled when you're incentivized to do that, when you're not. So I don't really see that as a particular concern. And yeah, frankly, Arweave as it is right now, this thing works pretty damn well. So yeah, I really don't think it'll be needed for a really long time, but we got to have something. We got to have a solution to solving the problem of adaptability over centuries if we actually want to make the thing permanent. And that's why we put so much time and focus and effort into it. And we put it in place now so that we have a strong foundation to work from, if that answers the question.
A question around Permafacts. So a big issue that Twitter has, for example, is that community massive bot attacks. What sort of cyber resistance do you foresee being implemented for Permafacts where bad actors can't aggregate automated attestations and so on?
Yeah, so this is going to be probably the hardest problem to solve for me going forward. And yeah, so the first thing that we're going to do is integrate the vouch protocol. So we want vouched users using our platform. That's sort of key. So if somebody's taking a position of support or opposition on some piece of data that's on Arweave blockchain, they will be a vouched user. So that's the first step, and that will evolve over time.
So Romain talked about making Arweave more fun, and David has JokeDAO. So maybe you guys can talk about some ideas on how do we make the community a little bit more funny or fun.
Yeah, sure.
I'm down.
Yeah, so this is the great question, right? Which is going back to what I was saying before, is like, how do you create social experiences that are interactive and engaging and incentivized, right? And I think so what we built is like really simple tool where a contest creator puts a prompt to a community, people submit responses, and they vote on their favorites. And so you can imagine lots of wonderful, boring use cases for this, like DAO governance and refining proposals and electing who you want on the multisig, right? But I think you can also start to imagine games being played, right? Where you can imagine what does a decentralized product hunt look like, where everyone's competing to vote on their favorite community each week? Like, what does an econ prediction market look like, where it's everyone's competing to try to figure out the best solution to the economy at the given moment? And then you can start imagining these really interesting media games, right? Where you could have that DJ who says, here's a beat, remix this. We're going to have a jury of top music producers who are going to vote on their favorites, and then the top one's going to be minted as an NFT, right? And that'll help split royalties. But meanwhile, they're listening to everyone else's, and you're winning rewards, and so you can start to gamify this whole process of media creation, where people can be winning rewards, but they can also be building on-chain reputation. They can get them rewards in the future, can get them job opportunities, and they can be socializing with each other because they're trying to compete to win, right? And so I think that's what I think about a lot. Is right now it's just text-based. Some people submit images that are stored off-chain, etc. But long term, it gets really exciting when they're not only able to submit video content and have that run a film festival on-chain. That has to be done in Arweave, right? What does a film festival look like in the future? It is Arweave, right? But you actually creating these new use cases where creators have a interactive fan community that is all working with each other to try to co-create with one another. And I think part of the failure of NFTs to date is that it's just been about consumption and not creation. And so really being able to co-create things together, that's the composability that you can get from permanent storage and from Arweave, where it gets really, really exciting.
There's this quote by Jello Biafra from the Dead Kennedys, and I always love this quote.
Dead Kennedys.
He had it in his No More Cocoons spoken word album. It says, anyone could have made this record, now go do your own. And I think that's the punk rock DIY perspective, that it's doper to create than it is to consume, I think. And I think that's something we're battling with. You got to make it fun to create content that we care about. That I think the realization that's going to be here forever is empowering for artists and really interesting. I think that's super fun, I
mean, what is TikTok? What is Twitter? It's a chance for you to recompose anybody else's content and make it your own. Now imagine what if you could make money doing that.
Any closing thoughts?
Let's just build, whoever, all the devs, just build stuff, please. Let's continue building. That's my my final thought.
Mint ANS. That's my final thought. All right, Sam, you say something serious now.
No, I'm afraid I just have to thank everyone for coming. It's really amazing to see you all. And thank you again to the Ario team for putting this whole thing together. Really very grateful to have this community event. And I hope that we'll see everyone in Austin and also in Poland. Sound like great Arweave events coming up too.
We gotta thank Andrew as well. I mean, this man is amazing. Look at, MC, j'approuve.
I'll end with a quick thought, which is I think financial blockchains are generation 1, and it was the most practical use case to start off with to lay financial rails. But it's only one type of blockchain. And Arweave really shows us that a blockchain is much bigger than financial transactions. It's all of data. Honored to be here, and just thank you for everyone for organizing this.
Thanks, David.
Yeah, thanks for coming out. Andrew, thank you. You're amazing at this. Honestly, you're hilarious. And check out Permafacts on Twitter, Permafacts. We just put out a Facts SDK, JavaScript SDK that you can should be the first tweet at the top, but you can attach a fact mechanism to anything now. So give it a try and keep building.
Thank you, everyone. The future of Arweave is in good hands, and this has been an amazing community panel. So one more time, let's give it up for the panelists, please.